David Foster Wallace knew that we were headed into a literary dark age. He knew what was about to happen. Well, what were his thoughts? Was he optimistic about it or was he pessimistic about it? And today we are going to hear Wallace speak at length on attention span shortening, people leaving reading for other forms of media, and if reading can actually survive. And my name is Ian, and here on Right Conscious, we cover everything related to David Foster Wallace. In the playlist down below, you will find over 100 videos on Wallace's life, his books, and his writing philosophy. And so, enough for me, everyone. Let us now hear from Wallace. Good art can do things that nothing else in the solar system can do, and that the good stuff will survive and get read, and that in the great winnowing process, the shit will sink and the good stuff will rise. But realize the limitations of space, time, and the historical situation. You are talking about nobody will be trained to read the way we read, which means that if people are reading in more short bursts or whatever, that art will find a way to form conversations with readers in the brain voice or vernacular that they've got. And for a while, when they, what is it? Nietzsche's term or Heidegger's term, the old gods have fled and the new gods have not come. It will be a bleak time, but I mean, Jesus. If the thing made the jump from oral, jongular ballad to printed text, then I think it can. Then the conversation gets cut off. But I assume Wallace was going to say, then I think that we can cross that bridge also. And so there is a lot to unpack here. But first and foremost, Wallace hits us with this optimism that many of us do not have in our hearts right now. There is an endless amount of writing bitch-assness going on online right now. It is, for the first time ever, a possibility for every single person out there, no matter their writing ability and what they are writing about, to become a full-time author. And yes, you cannot be the artiste manqué and throw the scarf over. I'm an array and send it to the slush pile. This is me. I don't have to market myself. No, you are going to have to do things that authors in the past didn't have to do. But Walt Whitman was not doing radio interviews. Nabokov wasn't being interviewed by social media influencers. And so in our new reality, what Wallace, or I should say not what Wallace is saying, but our new reality is that the good stuff does rise to the top, but the persona, the person behind it, also has to rise with it. It is almost impossible now for a work to just stand on its own. And I understand that's not for the best, most likely. But in actuality, it is for the best because Wallace evoked this idea of the evolution from oral to the ballad, then eventually from the ballad to the alphabet. And a decade ago, we experienced the ebook revolution and then the audiobook revolution. And now we are at a new revolution. And so Wallace is correct. And Wallace maybe couldn't conceptualize that we are living in a time now where almost no one will be trained to read the way that we read. And he's saying like in a deep way. And that is 100% true. We are living in a post-literate society where if needed, people can generally read, but they've let their reading abilities just decay. And the people that read a nonfiction book on longevity or a Jordan Peterson book or an airplane thriller while they are on vacation, that is not kind of cultivating their reading ability. And so there has been a replacement, though, of classic reading. We do consume more short form content. We do most of the time read captions on the screen or read the description that someone writes on an Instagram post, let's say, of a photo, which sometimes can be very revelatory and good. And Wallace was basically making up that quote. I looked for that quote, and Nietzsche did say something similar, but didn't say the part that the new gods have not come yet. And we are in that window. We are waiting for these new gods to come. And as I've said many times before on this channel, what Wallace had to do to write Infinite Jest, to escape being a logic bro, to escape kind of being stuck in this redundant cycle of never writing a masterpiece, because there are great stories in A Girl with the Curious Hair. The Broom of the System has some really great spots. But to step into a moment, into a role where he was going to write a masterpiece, and people will say, it's not a masterpiece. You don't understand what's happening in the novel. Maybe you read a little bit of it and gave up, or you were just that person that doesn't let yourself emotionally open up to stuff. I've talked to countless people on this platform and then on other platforms that say they've never had their life transformed by literature, that they've read all these books and maybe one has changed their life, which means that they are not reading correctly. And so if we return to the quote, Wallace says that art will find a way to form conversations with readers in the brain voice or vernacular that they've got. And so unfortunately, or fortunately, our job is to activate Manchurian candidates as writers. And if you are a reader out there, then you should be sharing books with other people. But you cannot just throw infinite jest at someone. You have to put them into a funnel, which is a business term. Businesses will say, we need to get them coming in or get them to try this or do a free trial. And then eventually they will upgrade to the yearly membership to the gym or whatever. They don't go immediately to sign up for a year. They get people into the gym, get a couple workouts in, show them why it's great, and then they do that. And so in time immemorial, we had this base of readers who didn't have as much access to good television yet. That was like insane. And before the television was invented, reading even had a bigger supremacy. But even with the television, there weren't other options in terms of video games and cell phones and all of this stuff. And our society was more intelligent. Because if you look at test scores, we were doing better, but also we had the monomyth. Many people were reading the Bible. Obviously, some were, but my parents, for instance, were raised on the Bible. And so they were analyzing literature every single weekend, and even in their personal time, and even at like discussing at dinner, a book that I would say isn't the easiest book to read. And so if you can speak and think about the Bible in an eloquent way, then when you are given a Hemingway novel or whatever, you don't need as big of a transition period to get into, let's say, deeper literary fiction or art. And that process helped gain momentum. The classrooms, you hear about the classrooms of old. I have people in my book club who were, in schools in the 60s and 70s, and they were talking about the books that they were reading. We read Nabokov and The Sound of the Fury and all this stuff. And you're like, Jesus Christ. And they're like, everybody read that. It wasn't just like the AP kids. And I know as a high school English teacher that the AP kids of today, the smartest kids in the schools, as a collective, there's always outlier students, would not be able to read The Sound and the Fury, but struggle with even mid-level novels. And normal classes struggle with, I hate to say like low-level reading novels, but stuff like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is like a terrible book to show kids because it is too difficult, which is crazy to say. And so now we have two options. We could sit and complain. We could go on, 4chan's gone. We can sit and go to Writing Circle Jerk or wherever and talk about how, woe is me, this or that, no one cares. Or we are going to have to step in and go up the funnel a little bit. We aren't just going to get people who can show up and read our book en masse and make us full-time authors. And we're not going to be transforming lives like that. We're going to have to go up the chain a little bit. That's what this video is. I've helped thousands, if not tens of thousands of people start David Foster Wallace. And by listening to me talk about him, you are priming yourself a lot of the time to then go and read him. You have a different expectation and a positive support system behind you to go and read him. And even with that, many people fail. But the same is true with your writing. And this is why I talk about Substack so much. People are so fucking dumb when I hear them like talk about me or criticize me. They're like, he thinks the literary renaissance is going to happen on Substack. Well, it's partially going to happen on there, but of course it's also going to happen through selling books. But if you are a good author, you can only release a book every 3 to 5 years. And you are most likely not going to get a publishing deal, and most likely no one's going to care. And if you are trying hard and you're innovative, no one's going to be prepared for your style. At least the masses aren't. And so what you can be doing in the meantime is priming people with shorter work, whether that is a Substack note or an Instagram post or a short story or a nonfiction piece. You can do all of that and get them ready for your big release. And if you don't, because we are now so diversified in our micro niches and these writing styles, like right now, I was reading someone's novel a couple months ago who is a fan of the channel, and they were like combining, it was like James Joyce meets Faulkner meets Thomas Pynchon. And like that guy would tell you that too. And it was like, oh my God, this is a lot to get into. And I actually reread the novel. And on the second time, I actually got what was going on. The first time I was like, this kind of sucks. This is like a 3 out of 10. But then when I reread it, it was like a 9 out of 10 because I had to kind of acclimate to the style. But if I had read some of his other stuff and been kind of in his group, in his crew, and been, inundated with that, the transition would have been easier and I would have automatically seen what was good about the work. And I'm sure the jump from oral to the ballad and every other jump happened too, that there had to be a transition period. It's the same when you get someone into anything. When you are trying to get them into a sport or to watch a TV show, you try and prime them so that they can come in. And speaking of priming, this Saturday, I am launching my Infinite Jest book club. We are reading the first 150 pages or so, and no matter when you are seeing this, you can maybe catch up, or you can follow along with my Infinite Jest course, which covers half of the book at this current moment and will be completed by the end of this summer in 2025. It will easily span over 15, 20 hours, and eventually I'm going to continue to pad that with just more theories and talk on Infinite Jest. And so I would love to see you guys there. If you guys want a group to finish this book, we are meeting every single Saturday morning, once a month on Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And so unless you live in Australia or Asia, and you can still come if you're a night owl, you can make this call. You can just listen and type what you think in the chat if you are commuting or at work or with your family. You can listen in, and I record all of the calls. And so if you would like to join, the link is down in the description below. I would love to see you guys there. I also have dozens of hours of other content. I have 10 hours on the Wallace's work in Consider the Lobster and a bunch of other cool stuff. Go check it out, everyone. And if not, I have free content on there. There's a great video on David Foster Wallace on tobacco that's free, and a bunch of other free content. And you should be on Substack anyway to post your writing and to support other authors. And so we are unfortunately in the time where the new gods have not come yet. And I think it's very pessimistic to think that we will not have literary superstars. People will say, it's a dream to think that people will be like Hemingway one day. Guys, imagine this. Imagine if some of the authors like David Foster Wallace, Chuck Palahniuk, George Saunders, Stephen King, like there are so many authors out there. I mean, I could talk about Margaret Atwood, Cormac McCarthy. Like there are all these authors out there who have had their books read almost as much as some of those older authors. They have just as much name brand recognition in the average, Western household, but they haven't stepped into the role that they've needed to be. When any of those names I just said, what author out there, and there might be some European exceptions, and when they are, they're very polarizing. What author has actually become a persona, has actually become something bigger than themselves, has actually tried to put themselves out there and make something bigger? Like every single person I just named, the only person who maybe did that a little bit was David Foster Wallace. But as I've talked about before, he hid from a lot of that. He kind of created this fake persona that acted like he wasn't as deep into drugs as he was, and he didn't go to halfway houses, and then he wasn't this abuser. Like imagine that there was someone who was a Chael Sonnen, a Conor McGregor, or in an artistic sense, even though those are martial artists, someone like a rapper who was willing to promote themselves, who was willing to be hype, who was willing to go on all the big podcasts. If you go listen to Chuck Palahniuk on Joe Rogan, it's a snoozer. If you listen to most authors when they go on to Joe Rogan, which is this, amplifying platform, they just shit the bed. I've heard Rogan say before that he doesn't want to bring authors on because they just are so boring a lot of the time. And it doesn't have to be true that authors have to be these snoozers. It's just the persona that we've chosen to select. If you look at older authors, like I said, the Hunter S. Thompsons, the Tom Wolfes, the Ernest Hemingways, I mean, I could just go on and on. If they were given the amount of access to the world that we have now, they would have stepped into that role and become superstars. If Hemingway and all these guys were born today, they would have podcasts, they would have Substacks, they would be promoting themselves. Just look at what J.K. Rowling has done with One Opinion. J.K. Rowling doesn't like trans people, but she doesn't believe that trans women are women, and she isn't afraid to say that. And she's big on that issue. She's basically very liberal on every other issue except that one. And look at the amount of hate and media attention and divisions she's sown with just that one opinion. And then when you look, like I said, at Chuck Palahniuk, George Saunders, all these dudes, they don't actually have opinions. They're either not real people or just have no polarizing opinions. They're just sitting in a safety net. They have polarizing opinions. They just sit in their little safety net because they know if they say something, it's going to be rough for a while. But if there was someone, think if, J.K. Rowling went even further and she already has money. Think if there was someone who had good work and then they used their voice to amplify their work and, cross that gap. We've not seen that happen yet. And I'm not saying that someone needs to be like Kanye West. No, you don't need to be saying crazy shit and just pissing people off. But we have nobody doing anything. Even on the entertaining side, Rupi Kaur, Ocean Vuong, Sarah J. Maas, Colleen Hoover, Patterson. I could just go on and on. None of them are doing anything. And rap was like this for a while too. Rap in the early 90s was a little bit more bolsterous. And then in the mid 2000s, we were at this point where we were sitting there, and it wasn't until the internet exploded and we could get these more odd figures to kind of come in, even people like Odd Future back in the day, with their videos they were making and how they were polarizing people. We have not even tried that yet with our work. People love to talk about guerrilla marketing and all this stuff. There's been none of that. If there has been, then I would have heard about it by now. You would have heard about it by now. I'm literally in this world. I don't know everything that's going on, but the cream would have rise to the top. And so this is this transition period. And as I've been saying, the people who are the winners, the people that try in this transition period, even if you're not the best, you're going to end up winning. Just out of the act of doing it, you will attain more success than people who come later. So now is the time to hop in the game, everybody. Now is the time to put your writing out there and also put your persona out there. Also lead people to your work, because if you don't, they're just not going to show up. And so this is the message. If you guys would like to join me on Substack, I would love to see you guys there, whether in a free or a paid capacity. And I will see you guys very soon in the next video.